This is the Financial Freedom Fighters podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to the Financial Freedom Fighters podcast. We have a very special episode today. It is episode 10, a nice milestone for the Financial Freedom Fighters here. I'm your host, Jacob. I have my co-host, Mike Magno. How's it going, Mike?
Oh, Jacob, it's going great, man. It's our 10th episode, so congratulations on that. You know, we're coming along, right? We're figuring it out a little bit, but yeah, things are good.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you for everyone who's been tuning in. If you guys have enjoyed any of the previous 9 episodes, Mike and I would greatly appreciate, show us a little love, give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts that mean the world to us and helps us reach more people. So thank you for that. I'll give a quick rundown of what we plan to do today. We're switching it up a little bit, trying something out. We have 3 news articles that Mike and I are going to bring to you guys and kind of touch on and highlight all things happening within the real estate industry right now. So we're going to do a current events style episode where we kind of go back and forth on these articles that are surfacing the real estate industry right now. So that's the plan for today. And we'll kind of jump in with the first topic today. I'll introduce the article and then Mike, I'll hand it off to you to kind of speak about the article and kind of the implications for real estate investors. So this came out a little while ago, but Fannie Mae introduces 5% down payment option for multi-family homes. Mike, why don't you speak on this?
So those of our listeners that want to do the house hack, this is why this is important, right? Previously, if you wanted a low down payment option for a multifamily owner-occupied property, FHA was your only option where you could do 3.5% down. Some of the downfalls with FHA is, one, you have PMI for the life of the loan if you do 3.5% down. So the only way to get rid of the mortgage insurance would be to refinance the loan. Also, in an ultra competitive environment, many sellers don't want to deal with FHA loans. I'm not going to go into much more detail than that, but just understanding that there are some issues there. That being said, affordability has become a huge issue in this country. Housing affordability, obviously, at the forefront with inflation, as high as you and I have ever seen it probably in our lifetimes. As you mentioned, Fannie Mae, I think it was back in September, announced that starting in November, I think it was the 18th or 19th, they said that they're going to change the guidelines again, because it used to be this way many years ago. So they changed the guidelines back to buyers that were able to now put 5% down on a 2, 3, or 4 unit property that's owner occupied. Obviously, it's a huge opportunity for people to get into properties with a lot less money out of pocket and do the conventional guidelines, which obviously will be a lot more attractive to potential sellers if you're representing a conventional buyer, or as a buyer, you're going the conventional route.
Yeah. So thanks for giving us a rundown on that article, Mike. So for me, house hacking is easily the most dynamic and the lowest risk strategy. And it's a big regret of mine that I have not been able to house hack, or I haven't been able to figure that out, or I don't live in a market where that's the most straightforward. But if you're young, early 20s, I'm talking, you have to think about how you can make a house hack happen. And for all the listeners out there, a house hack is when you purchase a property that you are living in, but you are also using that property to generate income. And you can do that in a variety of different ways. So you're taking your property and in whatever manner you can, renting it out as well, whether that's the rooms, whether that's the separate units. Maybe you have an ADU in the back, and you could do all variations of renting out as well. You could do short-term rentals, you can do midterm rentals, you can do long-term rentals as well. But the idea is by renting out portions of your property, you are reducing the largest expense that anyone typically has, which is housing, right? So you are trying to live for free. And just to put some numbers on this, if your rent is $1,500, let's just say $1,500, and somehow through house hacking, renting out the rooms or renting out some units, you're able to reduce that to zero because the rent that you're collecting from your tenants is offsetting that $1,500 expense that you normally would have. That's the same thing as cash flowing $1,500 on an investment property. which is really, really good, right? So you have to think about it as that. Maybe you're not going to cash flow a ton, but if you can eliminate your biggest expense, that's the same as cash flowing the amount of that expense. And what that's going to do is it's going to absolutely supercharge your path to purchasing more investment properties. And the thing that's dynamic as well about the house hacking strategy is you live in it, renting out the rooms, you're getting an introduction to investment, introduction to being a landlord, introduction to just every aspect of real estate investing, and you're actually there so you can live it, breathe it, and problem solve. And then as soon as you get a handle on that, you can move out and do it again. And you'll rent out the unit that you previously were living in, and then you're going to be cash flowing even more, right? And so I think they talk a lot about this on the Bigger Pockets podcast, but such an underrated strategy, Mike, is to just house hack for a year, move out, house hack again, and just continue to house hack and build your portfolio that way while living in the property this entire time. And so that to me is such a powerful strategy. And the one downside of house hacking is if you're married or, you have kids, if you are in a stage of your life where it's not very convenient to do that, that's completely fair. I'm married. My dog is a little bit of he's kind of a wild card, he'll bite some people. So it's just like, I can't do that. That convenience at this stage of my life is not something I can easily give back. So that's just one thing to take in consideration. Now, that doesn't mean I can't buy a house where I can put an ADU in the back, or have a basement unit and things like that. There's still ways to do it. I'm still thinking about doing it. But if you are in a stage of your life where you can make that trade-off of convenience and comfort, if you can rent out the rooms, and I'm talking if you're fresh out of college or, you're in your early 20s and you can sacrifice that convenience, because let's be real, most of us in our early 20s don't have a lot of convenience or comfortability anyway. Just give that up and live for free or close to live for free. And that's just so powerful. So Mike, I don't know, do you have any other kind of thoughts on the power of house hacking?
No, I do. I mean, I think it's the most powerful tool for people, the young people, to get A, into real estate investing, and B, to build their long-term wealth. And the reason being, you touched on it, it's the opportunity for you to either greatly reduce or potentially completely eliminate your housing expense, which we all know, unless you're buying an Escalade on a payment, it's going to be your most expensive expense every month. And it's not. And it's not even just for young people. I mean, I've had clients that are my age that have now got into house hacking and bought a multifamily. I did it, and I didn't even know what I was doing it. I think I've shared my story, but back in like 2009 and 10, following the recession and a job loss, I had a guy that I worked with who was going through kind of a rough patch too. I had an extra bedroom. I was like, dude, just move into my place. I almost eliminated my housing expenses at that point. It enabled me to save money. One of the reasons I was actually able to get out of debt. So it can be very, very, very powerful if you can make those sacrifices just for a few years. I tell young people all the time, like, all you need to do is do it 6 or 8 times over a 12 or 15 year period. Like, you don't have to do it every year. You could do it every other year, and the really powerful thing too is, you can only use the FHA loan once, but you can continually use these conventional loans. So you can continue doing that over and over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are somebody that's house hacking, you have a distinct advantage over somebody. Let's say, for example, right, Mike, I really want to buy a fourplex in Cleveland, but I still need to get a return. Those numbers still need to make sense for me as an out-of-state investor trying to buy a fourplex in Cleveland, and I'm trying to stick to my numbers and stick to those returns. If you're a house hacker, you're analyzing that fourplex a lot differently, and you have a lot more flexibility in what you're willing to pay and the quote unquote returns you're looking to get, because you're really just focused on a different metric at that point. You're focused on how much is this going to eliminate my personal expense, whereas a pure investor is analyzing it from a completely different perspective. And so you can easily probably put in a much more aggressive offer with those parameters. So that's another thing I'll highlight. If you are house hacking, just make sure you're analyzing it from that perspective and understanding, because it's different than just operating it as an out-of-state investor, and you will have the expenses of a property manager and typical expenses like that. So that's another thing I'll highlight. You have an advantage because you're quote unquote exit strategy is a little bit different, right? Or how you're going to operate the property is a little bit different. So that's another thing I'd highlight about house hacking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had a client earlier this year. They bought a triplex in Lakewood, and they used a conventional loan. They were able to do a 10% down loan. I have a portfolio lender here locally that offers that for owner occupants, which was really popular before this whole change, obviously in the Fannie Mae guidelines. But prior, and this was before they made those changes. I think they were living in Willoughby, which is a nice east side suburb of Cleveland, and they were paying like $14.50 a month in rent. And by moving into that triplex in Lakewood, they'll be able to almost eliminate their housing expense altogether. Yeah, I think the two units that they're not going to live in, because the other thing too that was really powerful for them is this particular triplex was a duplex. It was two buildings on the same parcel. So up front was a duplex and up and down, and then there was a single family home in the rear of the property. And they were actually going to live in the upstairs unit of the duplex. And the upstairs unit of the duplex is actually the unit of the three that also needed the most work. So the downstairs was pretty much rent ready. They were going to put a tenant in there. They'll probably get $800-900 a month for it, probably pretty easily in Lakewood. The rear home was also a 2-bedroom home, so it wasn't that big of a single family home, but it's a single family home. And they would probably easily get $900 or $1,000 a month for that. And then they were going to live upstairs and fix up the other unit while they lived in it. So, you're talking probably, without busting out a calculator, their mortgage expense on that property is probably $2,000 a month, maybe $2,100 a month. And they're going to get $1,700 to $1,900 a month in rent. So, they're going to get their housing expense from $1,400 all the way down to probably $300 to $400.
While they're building equity, right? Getting that loan pay down, getting that appreciation. And that's the kicker here too, is that don't forget, real estate is not just about cash flow. It's about that equity buildup as well. Equity buildup through the loan pay down and through that appreciation. And so that all of the benefits of real estate investing while eliminating your housing expense it's such a slam dunk in terms of a strategy. The other thing we'll touch on, Mike, from a house hacking perspective is the approach to it is very market dependent. And we'll highlight Cleveland, an amazing market to house hack in. Amazing market to house hack in, just because the numbers lend itself well to doing that. Well, Cleveland in general is a great kind of cash flow market. If you're just thinking about pure rent to price ratio, Cleveland's a great market for that. But that also means it's a great house hack market as well, because the same rent to price ratios kind of apply there. And so amazing market. The Bay Area, California, not as straightforward, right? You're talking about $1 million properties, and the rents just don't justify the price tag on those properties. So you're probably not going to eliminate your housing expense. But if you are able to, let's say, match it, let's say we have to pay $3,000 a month in rent. Can you buy a property that maybe has an ADU or a basement unit or both? And can you get your actual living expense to be in that $3,000 range or a little bit lower than that? And so you're paying what you would pay in rent, but still getting that equity buildup, especially the appreciation in California, which can be really, really powerful over a long term as well. So not completely ruling out the ability to house hack in California, but it is market dependent. Like, you should approach it in that way. Depending on which market you live in, it might be a great house hack market. With this new guidelines from Fannie Mae, just like the amount of money you have to put down, it just really reduces the barrier to entry in all markets, right? You can buy a fourplex in San Diego, which is going to be really expensive, but if you only have to put 5% down and those numbers still work out, that might just be a really good play for you. And so house hacking is a great strategy. Research it, look into it, take advantage of the financing that's available to you in this realm. But I think we've kind of wrapped up on that one, Mike. So we'll roll to the next kind of news topic. And so the Fed, this is a Business Insider article, but there's plenty of articles that have come out to kind of echo this sentiment. The Fed is going to cut interest rates anywhere from 5 to 7 times next year. So if you're listening to this podcast, you're obviously interested in real estate investing, and you're probably very aware of the crazy interest rate environment that we are in today. And in episode 4, we broke down the current state of the housing market, where we really talked about this. But interest rates during the pandemic, all-time lows. You could get interest rate in the 2%. I talked to someone at my company holiday party the interest rate on their home is 2.75%. That's owner occupied, but 2.75%. Free money, right? So they sat there for a really long time, really low. And what did that do to the housing market, Mike? It just made it go gangbusters. A bunch of refis, a bunch of people pouring into the market. It's free money. Buy everything that you can. Get as much debt as you can. It was nuts. Then we all know inflation got out of control. And the Fed didn't react to that as quickly as they should have, because they said the inflation was transitory. And it wasn't transitory. And so what did they have to do to respond to that? They started raising rates incredibly fast at breakneck speed, taking us to where we are today. The federal funds rate is, I think, 5.5%. And obviously that is the rate that influences a lot of different other rates. But the one that we care about as real estate investors is obviously the rates that you'll get on your mortgage, which today sit in the high sevens, I believe, close to 8% for investing loans. And so that's where we're at today. But with the economy, with inflation getting a little bit more under control, the job market cooling a little bit, the Fed kind of looking like they might achieve this soft landing that they're hoping to achieve. Now the narrative is that they're going to start cutting next year, which I think we all kind of expected, but more and more articles are coming out to say that they are going to cut. And I think the question you have to ask yourself as an investor is, what do we think is going to happen to the housing market as the Fed starts cutting rates? What do you think, Mike? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, it gets back to a very, very simple economics principle of supply and demand, right? We still have a huge demand, even with the high interest rates. We have a very stressed supply, and you're just going to get more people back in the market, which is going to drive the demands up again. And it's just, I don't know. It's still an inventory problem here. I mean, there's not like some huge backlog of just properties sitting out there, and the properties, I can't beat this drum enough. Properties priced appropriately in the right areas still sell within hours or days with multiple offers. We were in a multiple offer situation just this week with a buyer client of ours where there was 6 or 7 offers on the property, and it sold it's under contract for over 10% over list. So, I mean, I hope we don't get back to where we're at 27 offers on a property. Remember that one, Jacob?
Yeah, that was a tough one. Here's the thing. I'm just going to say what needs to be said. The people that are waiting on the sidelines right now because the interest rates are too high are the same people that complained that the market was too competitive and the prices were too high when the rates were low. You need to stop. Because it's never going to be a perfect market. The rates are low, then prices and competition is up. If rates are high, the numbers are tougher to pencil because, your financing cost is increased. You're never going to have a completely balanced market. But if you're aware of the environment that you're operating in, and hey, we have a little bit of indication right now that the rates are going to come down over the course of the next year, 12 to 24 months. And we know that all of the demand that's sitting on the sidelines is going to flood back into the market, which is going to put the goal of getting a house and investment property is going to be much harder because you're just going to have so much more demand that's flooding the market. But that hasn't happened yet. So we have what feels like a little bit of a sweet spot from now until those rates actually do come down, that you can get into an investment property with less competition than you would when the rates start to come down. And then what? You get that property and the rates come down and you eventually are able to refi, but you got that property at the time that the rates were high, and the price that you acquired it at is going to be reflective of that. If you're waiting for the rates to come down, the price you're going to get, the acquisition price of that property is going to be reflective of the rate environment, which is going to affect your payment anyway. And so that's what I'll say is, don't wait on the sidelines for the rates to come down, because that's what everyone is doing. And I'm not saying buy anything right now. Still run your numbers, still do your analysis, still stick to your buy box, but just know that investors are taking advantage of the environment that we're in right now because they move differently than the rest of the market, right? Investors zig when everyone else is zagging. And that's like Mike and I are trying to instill in you, is that there's a sweet spot, but we don't know how long that sweet spot's going to last, because as soon as the rates come down, it's going to be a tough market all over again.
Yeah, no, you make some awesome points there. This is what I tell people all the time. You just got to buy. I mean, you just got to, you got to figure out where you can buy, where it makes sense for the goals that you want to have. Like I was telling you before we started recording today, I'm refinancing that property that we talked about in the last episode about the BRRRR, the property that I turned into a BRRRR. I'm refinancing that thing at like 9%. I'm using a DSCR loan. It's a cash out refinance. So those rates are higher to begin with. That property is still going to cash flow, even at 9%. So, that's where people have to understand, like, the rate is not, the rate matters, but in the grand scheme of things, they don't matter as much as you think they do.
The chances that the rate that you get at acquisition is going to be the rate that you have long term is just so low.
Yeah, it's typically a pretty short period of time that you're going to have that actual mortgage, right? You're either going to sell the property, you're going to refinance it, you're going to, there's all kinds of a movement typically in when you have a property. So that's where I'm at with it. Like, hey, I needed to tap into the equity that I created in that property. Does it stink as 9%? Well, yeah, I mean, it is, it's whatever. But at the end of the day, I still have a property. It's completely renovated. It should be low maintenance for the next 5 to 10 years anyway, if I even own it that long. I'm going to get it. I've gotten a ton of interest in the property from a tenant perspective, and I'll still cash flow. Once again, my numbers are a little skewed because I self-manage, but that property's going to cash flow $300 to $400 a month, even at 9% interest.
Even at 9%. And another thing you told me offline, Mike, was that you chose that particular loan product because there was no prepayment penalty.
Yeah. So,
and that gives you flexibility, right? So go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're making a good point. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but yeah. So for the listeners, when you're doing these types of loans, especially the investor type of loans, you're going to have options. Now, I could have got a lower rate, but I would have been locked into some type of staggered prepayment penalty on that loan. And in the DSCR world, the debt service coverage ratio loans that we've talked about several times on previous episodes, in that world, you're typically going to see a prepayment if you pay off the loan within the first 5 years. And it's typically staggered. So like in year 1, there's a bigger penalty than in year 2, then year 3, then year 4, then year 5. Or you can do there's 3-1 options out there where it's 3-year prepayment. But I wanted a 0 prepayment. I wanted ultimate flexibility, because what if the rates come way down this summer, we see a spike in prices, and then I just want to flip that property, or I want to refinance it in 4 or 5 months. If we see a huge decrease in the rates, if I can, even in 6 months, if I can reduce that rate by 2% or 2.5%, then it'd probably be worth it to me to do it, even though I would have obviously some closing expenses. But if I can increase my cash flow by another $200 a month, it'd pay for itself pretty quickly.
Yep. And again, we touched on this last episode, but the exit strategy is so critical. Know what your exit strategy or exit strategies are, and always be thinking about that. And Mike is giving a lot of great examples this episode and last episode of how he's thinking about the exit strategy and increasing his chances of success on this particular deal by thinking about the exit strategies. Cool. So I think that wraps it up. Again, rates are coming down next year, but that means competition will increase as well. So get educated, get ready, and like Mike said, just buy. We'll move on to this last article, Mike. A couple different articles, but they all kind of are around the same topic, which is the role that private equity is playing in the single family home space. And so I'll introduce the first article, which has been kind of dispelled as fake news, but my sister-in-law actually sent me this, and it said 44% of all single-family homes purchases in 2023. So all 44% of all single-family home purchases in 2023 were by private equity firms. And that is just fake news, 100% fake news. If you kind of dig into the article, they're citing a bunch of things that don't really line up. And if you actually do your research, which we've done, private equity owns about 3 to 5% of the single family home stock in the United States. right? So these are big investment firms that are pooling money and purchasing these single family homes and holding them as investments, and then obviously distributing those returns to their private equity clients, high net worth individuals, et cetera, et cetera. That is the reality, is that the private equity firms are kind of a scapegoat for what is a bigger problem in the single family home space, which is inventory. And so that's just one thing. 44% is a crazy number, and that article is just completely bogus. But another article came out, which my wife sent me. It's a Vice article. Hedge funds have invaded the housing market. A new bill would ban them. So kind of in the same vein, or the same sentiment against private equity firms, Congress actually introduced a bill, I think this was a couple of days ago, that would ban private equity firms from holding single family rentals, and that they have to actually sell off all their single family home stock over the course of the next 10 years, and then would be banned from buying them outright, which I'll get your thoughts on this in a second, Mike, but it's pretty wild. And look, let's be clear. Mike and I are both big proponents of anything that is going to increase the amount of affordable housing in this country. Because like we touched on in previous episodes, we are anywhere from 5 to 7 million homes short in this country of just inventory that we need to have all the homes that we need for people that want them, right? There's such an imbalance. And so anything that's going to help put a dent in that, we are proponents of. I'm a proponent of, right? This, to me, just doesn't feel like it's going to move the needle. And how realistic this is, Congress is going to tell private equity firms like, hey, you can't do this. Like, it feels far-fetched, and it also feels like it's misplaced in terms of not addressing what the real problem is. But Mike, I'll pass it to you. What are your thoughts on all this private equity and the role they play in this space?
So, I mean, you and I talked off air a little bit. I mean, first of all, that fake news article that came out with the 44% of purchases in 2023 made by private equity. That's like, just think, I mean, for those out there listening, when you read these things, like, just take a minute to like think and comprehend what that sentence just said. 44% of all sales in 2023. Well, we're only going to sell just under 4 million homes this year. So 40% of 4 million, I mean, come on. It didn't happen. It's so ridiculous. So that first one, I was just left me shaking my head. And as far as Congress getting involved with the hedge funds, I mean, I think it's just terribly misplaced. We need to incentivize builders to construct some more affordable housing. And I'll just use Cleveland, obviously, because I live here, but in the Cleveland market, right, we need more housing like a Parma, Ohio, which is Cleveland's largest suburb, where there's, neighborhood, I mean, just blocks of 3-bedroom homes and very modest, 1,000, 1,200, 1,300 square foot homes. That's what we're sorely lacking in this country, unfortunately. And I'm not going to pick on these guys, because once again, they're operating a business, but the large home builders of the world, the Ryans, the Pulte's, the Lennars in our area, Schumacher is a big one. These guys just build monster homes, right? And they do it because it's a profitability thing, right? They're building larger 2-story homes. The cost of construction is cheaper because they're building them up instead of out. And they're trying to maximize their ROI for their shareholders. And I understand that from a business perspective. And that's why I think this is terribly misplaced with Congress getting involved, where Congress should be doing some incentivizing of these companies to build more affordable, smaller housing. That's just my take on it. I'm just one guy, but I think that's where we need to. That's an issue that needs to be addressed, because that's what happened in 2009, 2010. So many of the builders went out of business, and then so many of them stopped building homes, right? And that's where we've struggled to even ever get back to where we were. We had a decade long, they say we need like depending on what article you read, you need one to 1.2 million new home starts per year to keep up with the increased demand. And from 2009 to 2020, there was only like 1 year where the new home starts were above 1 million. And, some of those really lean years, like 2010, 2011, 2012, there was only like 500,000, 600,000 home starts. So, each year you're just compounding the deficit, so that's where, it's really It's really difficult. And that's why I think the whole house hacking thing and I know that's why we wanted to tie all this together today, was because that's the way for people to really, when they complain about unaffordable housing, that's the way for the young people to get into the housing by buying a duplex or by buying a triplex or a quad, or like you mentioned, we don't really do ADUs here, but we do, sometimes you'll see in a basement apartment, or maybe a property that's got a walkout basement where, it's a in-law suite, that they can convert into a 1-bedroom or a studio apartment, something like that. So that's where I think, that's where people could take advantage of these lower down payment options and to get into housing. And here's the kicker too, right? Like, even if you don't want to build some massive rental empire, right? Like, even if you don't want to own 10 or 20 properties, what's wrong with buying one and living in it for 5 or 10 years until you're ready to then, have a family. And then maybe you want to move to that single family home in the suburbs, and you've built up all this equity in that property, and you can do a home equity line of credit on it to maybe offset some of your down payment money on the next part. There's just so many different ways to go about it. But I think that's going to be the most powerful tool for people going forward, just to get into affordable housing.
Yeah, you hit on such an important point, Mike, and I want to double down on that one. Mike and I are real estate investors, and we obviously have a lot of ambition to have these portfolios and kind of deploy these different strategies. But that doesn't necessarily need to be your aim, right? Just like Mike said, having 1, 2, 3 investment properties just to diversify out of the 401k, just to diversify out of the stock market. And let's say you don't quit your job. You like your job, you continue to work, but you just have 2 or 3 rental properties to diversify your wealth, to diversify your kind of income streams. At the end of 20, 30 years, those things are paid off, ton of equity buildup. And like Mike said, you're going to have a lot of optionality, whether you sell them, whether you refinance them, whether you just continue to collect the rental income, and that just helps ease retirement whenever you do decide to retire. That's the more important thing. You don't have to be Grant Cardone or Brandon Turner or these people that are, syndicating these large deals. You don't have to be a mogul. You just have these investments that are making the aim of retiring more achievable and a little bit sooner, right? A little bit sooner. And I think ultimately that's what we're all after. Now, how soon you want to accomplish that is going to dictate the moves that you make. I have aspirations to do it in 5 years or less at this stage. That's kind of where I'm at right now. But that doesn't have to be you, right? And so understand the power of real estate investing, regardless of what your kind of goals are. Real estate probably is going to help you achieve them, right? Whatever those goals are, real estate is going to be one of those aspects that's going to bring you closer to them. And that's why Mike and I believe so strongly in real estate as an investment. And the 5% Fannie Mae conventional loan just really reduces the barrier to entry for people, which is the biggest hangup, right? So, Mike, I think that pretty much rounds out our current events for the day. So I'm going to take us home. We're coming up on the end of the year. 2024 is right around the corner. Start to think about your goals, everything you want to accomplish in real estate investing and outside of real estate investing. And yeah, let's hit 2024 hard and let's make everything happen. You can find me on all socials at Cashflow Saga. He is Mike Magno. You can find him on all socials at Realtor Michael Magno. Give us a follow, shoot us a message. If you listen to the show, tell us how we're doing. Tell us if there are other topics you want us to touch on. We're happy to do future episodes on any topics you guys want to hear about. So this is episode 10. We are the Financial Freedom Fighters podcast. We'll catch you in the next episode. Peace.
See ya.